Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dysphoria podcast. This time with Hudson and Zaeem and me.
Yeah, let's go.
Today, the topic is the future,
Yeah, the future.
what it holds, if it's more important than the present, if it's more looked forward to than the past.
And I've been thinking about this a lot lately because, due to certain circumstances that I'm not going to specify, the future has been a lot more pressing to me. I've been more focused on what I'm going to do and how to find security in life rather than enjoying my life right here, right now. And personally, what I've discovered is that that's a relatively toxic mindset because if you're like I'm 15, right? And if I'm focusing solely on what I'm going to do in the future, then I have no time to cultivate my just to cultivate my general knowledge and capacities in the present. So I think, personally the future should not be much of a pressing matter for people our age. Um, but contrary to what I'm saying and what I think, I just can't stop thinking about the future. And I don't know, I think it would be interesting to find out what other people my age think about that.
I mean, I'm in the complete opposite situation where I feel as though I'm in a toxic mindset of living way too much in the present. I I kind of rely on the idea that no matter what I do, that it's very rare that I can get, screwed to a point where my life goes nowhere. Like there's always going to be something to carry me to where I want to, or where I, potentially, would find myself enjoying in the future. But it's also very likely that I don't find success or happiness in the future, and that what I'm doing right now is fruitless. And I don't like to think about that, and I don't think about it, which, while, like, on the one hand, it keeps me happy in the present, and it makes me, seem fine on the exterior with what I'm doing at the moment. But on the inside, I'm kind of scared of what's to come because I don't plan for what's to come.
uh,
I mean, at the same time, like, we're all extremely lucky to have been born with a safe net under us.
yeah.
So I don't think
I mean, that's kind
we,
of what I'm relying on.
yeah, exactly. Like, we could do a lot of shit and we would still have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like right now, living in the present is kind of just, well, to me at least, pointless because there's nothing to look forward to in like the immediate future. And the only thing I've been doing for the past like 8 months is just preparing myself for what's to come in a year or something, like when all the lockdowns will be gone.
Yeah.
That's about all I have to live for.
Well, I mean, I'm talking more about the concept of the present and not the present that we're living right now, because the present right now is it's not that cool.
It's not that cool at all. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of like I believe I live with this mantra, this belief that if I can assure security in my passions right now, then I won't have to worry about them later. So like let's say if I were to blow up music, like with if my music were to blow up in the next year, then cool, I don't have to worry about, working towards that in the future. So I'm in such a hurry to have that happen when really I should just be working on the quality of it itself more than worrying about whether or not it blows up. Same thing with this podcast that I'm starting. I have the mentality that if it blows up as fast as possible, then I don't have to worry about cultivating it in the future.
But are
But
you living in a world where it will blow up? Like, you are certain that this is it. You found it.
even like I'd like to say so. I had that mentality before, but even like but now I've grown to a point where I'm not even sure if that's gonna happen. Like I'm so scared of uncertainty. I like it when things are certain, when I can bank on things. But that's why I question a lot of the time whether or not I should give up these passions, because I can easily just succeed in school, become a lawyer, and then I'll be set for life, right? But then I
Well,
won't end up fulfilling myself.
you should still definitely have passions, right? Stuff like this, while it does take up your time, I'm sure it doesn't take up so much time that you can't focus on schoolwork. You can definitely manage that, and it's good to learn how to manage that. So you definitely should continue in your passions, I feel.
Yeah, and also, I mean, at the same time, most people's passions are something that aren't necessarily gonna pay off in the future.
Oh, for sure. You don't hear
The
about them because they don't get popular, but there are lots of people that follow their passions and don't make it.
Yeah. Uh,
but the
uh,
thing is that
yeah.
we all know that if you put enough into anything, it will eventually, give it back. Because there's no world out there where like it's like gambling. If you gamble enough, you'll never lose because the odds are built that way. If you put 1 billion into something, it's gonna give it back because there's a threshold where uncertainty is just you've prepared so much or you've built so much, I'd say, a base that's so strong that there's no way that you won't be able to go through it.
I agree with you there. I hate when people say, "Oh, getting famous is just luck." Finding success through your passions, it's all just luck, right? You just have to make it. It's not luck. If you're not finding success, it's not because you're not putting enough, or there's something wrong, right? Your marketing's off. The quality of what you're doing is off. It's not luck. The
Yeah.
world isn't built around, oh, this does well because it just does, and this doesn't because it doesn't, right? People
Yeah.
people can control these things.
I
Yeah,
think.
I think.
Yeah, you
Oh,
go
go ahead.
first. Okay, I'll go ahead then. Because I think a lot of like my constant state of being in a hurry, being in a rush, despite my young age, comes from the fact that like the people around me and myself included have kind of set the standard for myself like ever since I was young, the main thing is that like, oh, Zaeem, you're so out of the ordinary, you're a very mature boy, you're gonna do great things in the future. Like everybody tells that, doctor tells me that, and that's not to flex or anything, quote unquote flex, it's just like doctors, teachers, even friends to a certain extent, they all tell me that. So then I have this thought in my head that is always there that like if you don't achieve something great, well then all of this quote unquote out of the ordinary behavior will just be for nothing or it never even existed. I can't take It's almost as if I can't take my own rewarding qualities without a grain of salt. Like it always has to come with something else to really be something of value. And I think that's where a lot of my I need to succeed in the future, like that mentality. I think that's where that comes from.
So you're
But
saying that the pressure that's put on you in the present is pressuring your future?
Yeah, it's yeah, essentially. And I don't know if
Okay.
y'all can relate.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, like, there's always gonna be. What I've understood is that there's a certain limitation that everybody reaches at one point. Like, ever since like I was young, a lot of people were like, "Yo, math is easy," and then the more you go through time and the more you like advance, people are gonna be like, "Oh, I have to study now," or like, "Oh, I'm studying math," which I never thought was useful. And there's certainly going to be a point where if you put enough time into something or you learn like like more, let's say, detailed ways to do things, there's going to be a point where you're going to have to put more and more effort into it.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody says that you're smart as a kid, it might be true, but you don't know, like, if you don't put effort into something, you aren't gonna stay smart forever, because
Oh
there's
yeah.
always you always have to put your part in
That's
Yeah.
what you
why
do.
that's exactly why I love my sixth grade French teacher. He on the last day of school, he came up to me and he said, "Oh, a lot of teachers have called you like a gifted child, right?" And this isn't a flex. And I said,
Yeah.
"Yeah, yeah, people think that I'm smart." And he said, "Well, you better start working because I see that you don't, but you're getting good results, and that's not gonna work forever."
Hmm.
And he's right because it's not working. I'm currently have to look at my life again, like look at what I've done so far and go, okay, something's something's wrong. I gotta fix something, and it's the effort. I don't put enough
Yeah.
effort into anything.
I think that's something that all three of us have in common. The fact that, our lives were essentially, this idea was planted into our heads that we're smart kids, so we don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to work that hard to achieve what our peers achieve or can achieve. But all three of us will eventually come to a point or have already gotten to a point where we realized that we do have to put in effort or else we won't reach the standards that we once could. And for me, that was when I first started I hit the mental obstacles that were given to me, like with the bipolarity and everything. And
Hmm.
I think for everybody the obstacle that they're eventually going to hit is different, and it's so sporadic. Like you could I if you told me, because when I was a kid I saw bipolar people because of the way that society treats them. I kind of saw it as insanity. It's like that's what
Yeah.
craziness is, you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
when
Yeah.
I'm going through it and I'm living it, and then I find out that I'm bipolar, I'm like, okay, so am I the insane person that I thought I would never become? Am I mentally unstable? No, I'm not. It's just a disorder that, is relatively common. The commonality of it isn't talked about enough. It is a relatively common and prominent mental disorder. So that's the obstacle that I hit, and that's when I realized, okay, I need to put effort because now I have something that's going to stay with me for the rest of my life, and I have to be able to overcome and shine through. And that's when I realized I need to start putting effort, and then I realized it even more recently when a member of my family got pretty sick. So now I feel like I have to make them proud. So I'm working even harder. But another thought that comes with that is, will this hard work be worth it? And what you guys said about how what you put out in the world you'll eventually get back, that makes me feel like it
Hmm.
is going to be worth it, because I am putting a lot of work in now. And
Yeah.
I think it will be worth it eventually.
Everything is always worth it eventually.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally don't know if I've like hit that barrier that
Mm.
I'd have to put work in. I think mainly because before I used to, not pay attention and, not study, and I'd go like I'd be fine.
Yeah.
And I realized that my memory is like a much powerful tool that I once thought it was. So when I had like actually started putting, some started thinking about the things that like that were like taught to me,
Hmm.
I was able to retain them almost like perfectly. So I kind of just I'm waiting until I have to do something extra to go by. And
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is my perspective. I'm not trying to change the way you live, but I think if you
mm,
were to take initiative and act, because I had the same mentality as you. Secondary 1, 2, I started realizing that, oh wait, I can't just not study and then get good grades. Like I was getting passing grades. I was getting like 80s, but I was trying to get 90s, and realized I couldn't do that without studying. And I think if you were to take initiative, even though you haven't reached that point now, if you were to take initiative and start working harder, I feel like maybe you could avoid to a certain extent the obstacle that's going to force you to work harder. You know what I mean? If you're ahead of the curve.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
kind of
I
like
mean, yeah.
it's kind of like you're constantly moving forward, right? Time is constantly going. You're constantly, advancing, and every once in a while there's like a wall. And I think what you have to do, it doesn't matter the method in which you use to get there, but you have to create some sort of ladder before you hit that wall, so that you don't have to start rethinking your life and going back and changing things.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
what some people like me back in the past struggled to do, was to prepare themselves for the obstacle that come in the future.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good metaphor with the ladder and the wall. I think
Mm,
it represents the idea of being prepared very well, because no matter what you do in life, you can't escape the eventual problems that are going to be thrown at you. So if you create your own, and I know we already mentioned the fact that because we live in relatively high society, we already have a safety net. But if you create like a personal safety net before you really need it, it can come in clutch. And I haven't done that. So I had to deal with all of my problems head on, and they all kind of happened in one burst, and they're still happening in one burst. And because I was too cocky, I was too full of myself to realize that I needed a safety net for myself, I just had to deal with all of them at once. And I'm not saying for you it's also a question of pride, but for me it was definitely a matter, not a question of pride, a matter of pride. But for me it's definitely a matter of pride. Sometimes I get too full of myself and forget that I'm a normal person that needs normal person things to succeed. And I just think that if you you create a safety net for yourself before needing it, it can come in very handy.
I enjoy
I
hearing
mean,
your
yeah,
perspective because it's a lot more complex than mine. I just don't care enough.
I
yeah,
mean,
honestly, me too. I'm just too lazy to, put a safety net up, so I don't. I mean, at the same time, I do. It's kind of just that it's not really. It's more of it's if I, for example, in school, if I don't get 90s, then shit, there's something wrong. That's about it. Is like if it's
yeah.
already happened, if I'm already going downhill, then like if, for example, a 70, like that's what I don't want to have, so I go up to 90, and if I start getting 80s, I work harder, and then I go back to 90, and it's just like back and forth to not reach 70, because then if I reach 70, I get, go back down to 60, 50, and then you're kind of just fucked.
Yeah, I get that. But for me,
But it's not. Yeah.
I, I I didn't hold school as much of a priority. Like school wasn't much of a priority to me for a while, especially when I first started experiencing symptoms of bipolar. School stopped being a priority to me, and I started focusing on things around me because I just didn't have the mental capacity, energy wise, to focus on school that hard when I was flourishing in so many different categories of life. And when I say categories of life, I mean category, because I feel like the way you live your life can be categorically separated and categorically defined. There are people who live their life in a more free spirited kind of way, and there are people who live their lives in more meticulous and analytical ways. And I was flourishing in several of those categories. I was being more artistic and free spirited while also maintaining my analytical perspectives. And I just didn't have the time to focus on school. At least I didn't feel like I had the time to focus on school. So I stopped, and my grades kind of went to the 70s, and sometimes I just fail because I just didn't care that much anymore. And then I realized that if you really want to flourish in these spheres and these categories of life, you have to learn how to manage every aspect. Because you can't say that you're great at life when you can't manage every aspect of your life. And even though I pretended as if, oh yeah, I'm purposefully doing bad at school, I had I had stopped trying for so long that was the standard that I had ended up setting for myself. So now I'm working at managing each sphere of my life and forming this kind of this kind of harmony between each of the spheres that I live through, and just becoming better at each category that I find myself living through.
Going back to what you said about pride, there's also kind of like a sense of you don't want to put in effort into something, into a category that might fail. And if
Yeah,
you do fail in that category, you don't want to admit to the fact that you tried your very best and put a lot of that time and work and effort into that.
exactly.
Mm.
Especially when the
I mean,
outcome, yeah, like when the outcome is bad and I put a lot of effort into something. Like I remember the last math test we did on the exam day. I did badly on it, And I had put a lot of effort into preparing for it, but I didn't want to admit to anyone that I did badly on it because I'm supposed to be this smart guy. And how would a smart guy prepare for a test and still do badly?
You know, the exact same thing happened to me.
Personally, my problem with, like not putting enough effort into something is that I'm very bad at prioritizing important things. Because basically, my line of priority is whatever I deem most, interesting, I do it first. And it doesn't matter if I'm already doing something that's more important but less interesting. If there's something that comes up, I will immediately switch to the other thing. Because I think it's a sense of I might not have like all day to do this, but what if the other thing was a better to spend my time on because it's just more interesting? Like if I have to do this eventually and have something now, I could always do this later or whenever, the due date is, because it's not fun.
So you manage your time based off what's enjoyable to you and not necessarily what is quote unquote important.
Yeah. And it's not good, obviously,
Well,
but
I don't think it's bad either, because a lot of
For sure.
people, like I know some people in our class, because we're in like big private school enriched program. There are a lot of people in our class who don't put any priority into what they find fun in life and put all their
Mm-hmm.
priority into their studies, and then they just
And it
become
shows
these.
in their
Exactly.
personality. They're unenjoyable.
Yeah, they just become these robots. And that's why, like, I have some friends who think they're not smart because they get bad grades in school. But then I tell them, like, no, you're a very smart person. I can see it in your personality. You're a dynamic person. And I feel as though being a dynamic person at the age of 15 is more useful than having, 75s to 80s. Because 75s to 80s still aren't bad. But if you're able to be a dynamic and thoughtful person, I think that shines through as intelligence. And Alex just typed in chat. She said she's nodding her head so hard right now because she's listening but she's not talking. But I'd say that, like, not to flatter you too hard, Alex, but you're one of the people that, like, whenever you like tell me like, oh, I got a bad grade, I'm so bad at this. It's like you're not a dumb person. You're definitely a smart person. I can see that because you're a dynamic person. And there are a lot of people who focus entirely on school and make it their top priority, but they end up losing the potential that they had in being a better, smarter, more intelligent person in any other sphere. You know what I mean? And
I
I
mean,
don't.
at the same time, it's maybe because, I'd say that a lot of us here are a lot like to live in the moment more than plan ahead.
Mhm.
But those people, like, their efforts are gonna be like, are gonna be worth something in the future, and it's something that we can't see now, but maybe it it would have been worth it. It'll be worth it to, have spent more time into, gathering knowledge than to gather social skills. And that's just something we don't know yet.
You can never know, and that
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
It
But
sucks.
I mean, well, yeah, it'd be great to know, but of course, that's unrealistic.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to just round it off, Like, the fact that we can talk all we want about the future, but we don't actually know what's gonna happen. So we might as well just work as hard as we can to become the person that we want to become and just let the world and life do the rest. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
about it. Thanks for listening if you did listen. Um, bye.
If you did.
If you did. If you didn't, well, screw you.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like you're gonna hear this because you're not listening.
Exactly.
Damn, so aggressive. That's how you talk to your listeners?
Unlisteners,
Unlisteners, yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry, sorry.
unlisteners.